Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Living Manna Church. Hi, guys. I'm Dave Sain, Senior Shepherd here at LMC. Happy Wednesday to everybody. And of course, it being Wednesday, you know what that means. It's time for Bible study for us. Hopefully, you guys are ready, got your Bibles out there, all ready to think and do about the things of Elohim. Before we jump into this, there's just a couple of commercials that we normally go through. If this is the first time you're hanging out with us, please do us a favor, subscribe. Also hit the bell so that you're notified each time that we do go live. If you enjoy these studies, please share and definitely like them, give us a thumbs up. And share them out with somebody. Let somebody else see them. Let somebody else hear them. If you got any questions, if you're in the chat room, we certainly would love to hear from you. Just give us a shout out from wherever you happen to be watching. And just be part of the study. The notes are available. They should be in the description box. Of course, they're going to be up. Excuse me. They're going to be up on the screen for you guys anyway. So got some neat stuff to share with you guys for tonight. So let's jump into this thing with a word of prayer. Abba, we love you. Give us eyes to see, ears to hear, and hearts that are willing to obey. Amen. Okay, so we got a lot coming up this next couple of weeks. I'll get into that at the end of the message today. I want to spend as much time as I can in the study because I got a lot of stuff I want to share with you, some really, really important stuff. We've been talking about for a little while now the destruction of the temple and its importance, its primary importance as a prophecy. I know very different than sort of the dispensational way we've been sort of used to over the years. The idea that there is a time that all that Daniel speaks about and all the Messiah speaks about in Matthew 24 are events that are coming in the future. But I think by now, at least in my limited understanding, it seems a lot more likely and true that these are events that have happened in the past, which has to make us shift our paradigm as to really what are the end times about, what do they look like, what prophecies are really about the end times versus prophecies that are about the fall of the temple. This is a monumental event in not just Bible history, world history. The building of the first temple, the destruction of the first temple, the building of the second temple, the coming of Messiah, who is the temple, the destruction of his temple and his rebuilding of the temple, that is resurrection, and the destruction of the second temple for the same reason that the first temple was destroyed. They broke the covenant. They did not recognize Elohim's word. They didn't recognize it in written form, and they didn't recognize it in flesh form. And so the temple is destroyed. And so that's where we are. We've gone over all sorts of things. I want to take it just a little bit to the right today. We're going to go over some history about all of this. We look at the prophecy of Joel yesterday, the prophecy of Acts last week, and the prophecy of Acts chapter 2, how it's connected, that the apostles, as the Spirit is coming down and they're speaking in all these languages, is preparation for the next 40 years between the death and resurrection and the actual destruction. Elohim gives the house of Israel 40 years to repent, just like in the wilderness, just like in the story of the judges, 40 years, 40 years, 40 years, 40 years, just keep popping up over and over and over. 40 years in the wilderness, Messiah, 40 years. He gives them another 40 years to repent, to hear the message, to make up their minds. And of course, they do make up their minds. And it's not all of the people that are Jews that did this, but the leadership, and many followed them. But many also followed Messiah. We'll get into that in just a second. So this is a monumental event, still memorialized today in the ninth of Av memorial of the destruction of the first. And first of all, the first temple and the second temple get destroyed on the same day. That should tell you something right there. So there's a memorial that still goes on today, and there's still a monument sitting in Rome of the destruction of the temple. It sits right there by the Colosseum, the destruction of Rome, a little monument that Titus built to himself of the destruction of the God of the Israelites, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, how the God of Rome overcame that God of Israel and took all the trophies back to Rome. So this is something that it's right in front of us, and yet many of us don't see it. It's part of our history. It's everywhere, but many of us don't see it. Instead, so many are looking forward to something in the future when we really need to look back in the past to understand what this thing is really about. Okay, so with all of that said, the topic and the title for tonight is called Not one stone upon another. Familiar, obviously, if you've been hanging out with us, familiar, not one stone upon another, right out of Matthew chapter 24, the very words that the Messiah says. But as I said, we're going to take this from a little bit different perspective than we did before. All right, so we're going to go over some history today. We're going to give you a history lesson, a Bible lesson, but a history lesson. So here is our opening verse for today. It says, "And Yeshua cried out again with a loud voice and gave up his spirit. And see, the veil of the dwelling place was torn in two from top to bottom, and the earth was shaken, and the rocks were split, and the tombs were opened, and many bodies of the set apart ones who had fallen asleep were raised. And coming out of the tombs after his resurrection, they went into the set apart city and appeared to many." Now, obviously, this is the resurrection. This is actually the actual death, and it tells us what happens after the resurrection. We obviously associate this with the veil being torn, because that's what it says in verse 51. "And see, the veil of the dwelling place was torn in two from top to bottom." I want you to notice this picture one more time. This is our opening picture. That is, just an AI version of, there is the Holy of Holies behind that curtain, and the veil is being torn, an earthquake is going on. And so that's sort of where I want our minds to start on this journey for tonight. However, I want to show you, before we jump into all of this, the difference between having a Greek mindset and having a Hebrew mindset. You know, we say we're Hebrew roots. It means we identify. We want to understand the Hebrew origin of all the things that we believe. It doesn't mean we're Jewish. It doesn't mean we follow Judaism. It doesn't mean any of those things. But it means that we need to understand the entire story in that context. It'll give us color and definition, thinking from a Hebraic way that a Greek mindset may not give us. And there's been some great work done by Dr. Miles Jones. He is a linguist, a biblical historian. Him and his team have done a bang-up job in bringing out the fact that the first Gospels were written in Hebrew, which makes sense. I mean, they're in Jerusalem. They're in Jerusalem. The disciples are in the Jerusalem. It's like the first 70, 80 years. In fact, even more than that, we're going to find out now. It's predominantly Jewish. And so it makes sense that, and he's found out that Matthew was the first gospel written. All of the gospels come from that. Every time the church fathers later on wrote in Greek, they went back to the Gospel of Matthew in Hebrew to correct, to look at what the language was. So Matthew, who is an eyewitness to everything, starts this whole thing off. Why is that important? Well, there's something called the supremacy. And from when you go to Bible college, you go to seminary school, they're going to pound into you that everything in our New Testament is Greek. It all started off with Greek, which means the thought process from which it's written down comes from a Greek mindset. And now we're finding out, no, this is Hebrew. It started with a Hebrew mindset, and it was translated into Greek, which doesn't diminish the Greek text by any means. But there was a time in church history where they fought with each other over whether the Greek was more authoritative or the Latin was more authoritative or whatever particular language was. But none of them wanted to admit the Hebrew was more authoritative, except some of the early church fathers absolutely did. So why does this matter? I want you to think about this. Now we're going to read this again. I got this nice and big up. Let me put this nice and big up on your screens so you guys can see this with me. So here's Matthew chapter 27, verse 50. We just finished reading it. Let's read it again. Now, this is right out of the Scriptures version. And it says, "And Yeshua," or Yahusha, "cried out again with a loud voice and gave up his spirit. And see, the veil of the dwelling place was torn." So I want you to see right here, it clearly says, and I mean, you can go to King James, you can go to NIV, you can go to ESV, RSV, you can go to like a dozen different versions out there. And you should look at each one of them as you do your own studies. And they'll all pretty much say the same thing. "And see, the veil of the dwelling place was torn in two from top to bottom. And the earth was shaken, and the rocks were split. And the tombs were open, and many bodies of the set apart ones who had fallen asleep were raised." Now, we normally look at this and we translate this as, okay, so this is Messiah. He's dying on the cross. He gives up the ghost, and the veil, there's an earthquake, and the veil splits in two, And here goes, and the earth was shaken, and the rocks were split, and we think it's the rocks of the tombs that were opened, and many bodies of the set apart ones who had fallen asleep raised. But we find out that those who, which is a crazy thought all by itself, but those who are raised don't actually come up until after his resurrection. So there is something in there that we're reading. When we read this in most of our English Bibles, we are reading it from a Greek or a Gentile perspective. And it's not that it's wrong, it's just not full. Here is the same verse from the Hebrew Gospels out of Spain, the Sepharad, because after the destruction of Jerusalem, many believers, they left. They went to Spain. They settled in Spain, and other places as well. They went to Syria. They went to all over the Middle East. But a large portion, and other Jews as well, went to Spain, and the gospel went to Spain. That's why it's called the Sepharad. Just means Spanish, Spain. So many people with a Latin background, a Spaniard background, probably have a background somewhere connected to those who were the believers that came out of Jerusalem. Later on called conversos. There's a whole big story about it. But that aside, here is that same verse in the Sepharad, in the Hebrew version of Matthew. So here it goes. This is Matthew chapter 27. And it says, and Yeshua crying out another time. So it's right up here. It says, he cried out with a loud voice and he gave up his spirit. But the Hebrew version says, and Yeshua crying out another time sent Ruach HaKodesh. And behold, the sanctuary was broken from two sides, upwards and downward, and the earth shook. Now, hold on a second. That's a little bit different than saying, and see, the veil of the dwelling place was torn in two from top to bottom. It's not different in that it's telling us a totally different event, but it's looking at it through different eyes. The Greek eyes, the Gentiles, as all of us are looking at this, and we say this all the time, we're looking at this as when Messiah dies, the veil, the thing that separated us, the thing that only one priest could go through. Now Messiah has gone through, it's been torn down, and now we all have access. Saul talks about this later on in the book of Hebrews. So from a Greek mindset, we're thinking we have access to the God of Israel, unlike they've ever had before. We have direct access through prayer to come and lay our petitions before him, unlike the way it was before, which is absolutely true. It's good, it's solid, it's true, but it's missing something. Because from a Hebrew mindset, yes, the veil was torn, absolutely. But it's not just that the veil was torn, it's that the sanctuary was broken from two sides, upwards and downwards, and the earth shook. So the earthquake, this violent earthquake, winds up not just destroying the temple; it destroys the chamber where they met, and they actually judged Messiah, where the high priest and the Sanhedrin judged him. That was destroyed. They never sat in that room again after that. For the next 40 years, they couldn't go there. It was so unsafe. But in the temple, what winds up happening is this: the lintel. This is the lintel up here. And in the temple, now this picture doesn't do it justice, it was a huge stone. And what they're telling us, the Hebrew mindset is saying, this was broken, which means the sanctuary is desecrated. You can't go in here anymore. This is now closed. That's Hebrew thinking. This becomes a prophecy. This one event here, with the lintel being broken. Let's go on and read. It says, and behold, the sanctuary was broken from two sides. So the crack went up here, it went across, and it just split down the middle, taking the curtain. So as the lintel falls, yes, the curtain splits in two. The Greek mindset is that the curtain split in two. The Hebrew mindset is that the sanctuary was broken in two. It was desecrated. It cannot be used anymore. It is now unclean from this point forward. It cannot be used any longer. That's two different ways of thinking about it, but you only get this other way when you start to read some of the same books we read, but we read it from the original Hebrew. And it says, and the stones were divided through the middle. He's talking about these stones. These stones were divided. And the graves were opened, and many bodies of the holy ones stood up and lived. So at the shaking of the earth, the stones, whatever stones were in front of the graves, rolled away, cracked, whatever. But he's talking about these stones right here, the lentils. This is what cracked. This is what is most important. So in a Hebrew thinking, the very center of Hebrew culture, the very thing that is the most important thing to them, the thing that later on, when the temple is destroyed, Josephus tells us even the people who were sick with famine on their deathbed, when they saw the temple burning, that people who couldn't even speak wailed and cried and moaned because this was the event. They were watching the house of Elohim come down. But this event that we're reading about here is the forerunner. This is the first stone of all the stones that will be taken down, and not one left upon another. This becomes a foreshadowing, a prophecy. In the Hebrew mindset, this becomes a foreshadowing and a prophecy to confirm the words of Messiah, that not one stone will be left upon another. And of course, he goes on to say they stood up and they lived and they went out of their graves after the resurrection, and they appeared to many. And of course, this comes from the Sepharad, which just means Spain, from Dr. Miles Jones, the Hebrew Gospels. You guys can get hold of them. Awesome stuff. Learn crazy stuff about the Hebrew origins of all of this. It matters. It matters. Not that it takes away from the Greek. It colors it. It gives us a different perspective. And it's an important perspective. Okay, so with that, this becomes then the first of the stones, and then 40 years later, all the rest of the stones come down as well. So they are connected. They absolutely are connected together. So here, let's go over a couple of different verses. These are the words of Matthew, the words from Matthew, but the words of Messiah and the words of Daniel. And here is, I want you to notice them, because this was absolutely not just the thinking of the Hebrew believers, the Netzarim, the people of the way, the first Christians. It was also the belief of the Gentiles as they came in, and we can see this appears in all of the early, we call them church fathers. We probably shouldn't. All of the first elders that came into and led after the 2nd, 3rd century, they all attest to this. Here's what they attest to. They all say, and here it is, Matthew 24:2. This is the master. And Yeshua said to them, do you not see all of these, meaning all the temple, everything around them, all the buildings, and of course, the temple? Messiah says, truly I say to you, remember, every time he says, truly I say to you, we better wake up, we better pay attention. He says, this is the title, not one stone shall be left here upon another. At all. At all. Which shall not be thrown down. Now, in the Sepharad, it says, instead of thrown down, laid waste, which just connects right to the book of Daniel. He's using the same verbiage, and depends on the version that you've got. Some versions go back and they say it properly. They say laid waste to connect it with the book of Daniel. So you realize that what Daniel's talking about in Daniel chapter 9 is this event. So the master is saying, at all, this is coming to a complete end. Everything will be thrown down. Everything will be thrown down. Notice there's no addendum to this of it coming back again. It's at all thrown down. And when you go to Daniel, Daniel says it this way, and he, meaning the Messiah, shall through Rome, coming in to destroy them, confirm the covenant. We talked about this before. Confirm the covenant of Moses that says if you break the covenant, this is what's going to happen. First 490 years, the first temple falls. Or first 497s, the first temple falls. Another 497s, the second temple falls. How many times do you forgive a person? Shimon asked the master. He said 490 times. Why? It's the same amount of time that Elohim's been patient through sevens for the destruction of the first temple, and the same amount of time Elohim's been patient with the house of Israel up to the second destruction of the temple. Those numbers are not arbitrary. So he says, and he, the Messiah, shall confirm Moses' covenant. If you keep doing this, the city's going to be destroyed. You're going to be scattered all over the world. in that last week, that last 7, and in the middle of the 7, in the middle of that week, he, this is the prince that's coming, meaning Rome, but it's more than just the prince of Rome. He, the Messiah, shall put an end, stop it. That's it. Done, finished, finito, no mas. Put an end to slaughtering and meal offering. And on the wing of abominations, he shall lay waste the temple, the altar, even until the complete end. Daniel's telling us when this happens, when this thing happens and this thing gets taken down and this thing gets destroyed, that's the end of it. That's the end of it. It is a total end to the slaughtering. It is an end to it. And that this end and that which is decreed is poured out on the one who lays waste. They are scattered into the nations until the end. So the belief in or the understanding of the first century believers, the second century, the third century, and beyond was that Daniel's prophecy and the Messiah's prophecy was complete. That when this happens, that's it. You don't rebuild this thing, or if you try, that's a no-no. That you're refusing what the Messiah has done, which is the whole reason why the lentil is broken. From a Hebraic mindset, you can understand why they would think this. It's been desecrated. It is done. Here's Luke chapter 21, verse 24. The master says, and they shall fall, meaning Israel, those who are slaughtered in the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple. They shall fall by the edge of the sword, and they will be led away captive into all nations. This is the decree that is poured out on the ones who lay waste. And Jerusalem shall be trampled underfoot by the nations until the times of the nations are fulfilled. They are going, Jerusalem will be trampled by the nations because it's been put to an end until the complete end. Jerusalem will be trampled by the nations until the time of this message being going out to all of those good and bad, the servants going out and sending this gospel and making the invitation to us to come. Until that's finished, that's it. And when that's finished, that's it. That's what Saul tells us in Romans chapter 11, verse 25. He says, for I do not wish you to be ignorant of this secret, brothers, lest you should be wise. I'm right here, guys. Lest you should be wise in your own estimation. That hardening in part has come over Israel, because it wasn't all of Israel. There was a great revival that went on. We'll talk about that in a second, for a long time, actually. But there was still many, especially the leadership, that wanted nothing to do with Messiah. So it says a hardening in part has come over Israel, that is the Jewish people, until, here it is, until the completeness of the nations has come in, even until the complete end. It shall be left not one upon another at all. Everything will be thrown down, everything laid waste, everything until the end. It shall be put to an end until the times of the nations are fulfilled. And here he tells us the same thing, until the completeness of the nations have come in. When that happens, when the completeness of the nations come in, and so all Israel, made up of the believers that are from the house of Israel, native born, Judah, from whoever from the tribes, and the nations, then all Israel shall be saved. And as it is written, the deliverer shall come out of Zion, he shall turn away the wickedness from Jacob, and this is my covenant with them when I take away their sins. So all of Israel is saved when the times of the nations are fulfilled, until the completeness of the nations have come in. When the full number of people are there for the wedding feast, that's it. That's it. It's over. It's done. That's end times. And so their mindset was that this proclamation Messiah says about the temple is final. The proclamation the prophecy Daniel gave about the temple is final. There is nothing else beyond that. And to do something else beyond that would be blasphemous. Here's Matthew chapter 21. This is the parable we talked about, the parable of the vineyard. Very, very important. Remember the patterns that we set up when we did it side by side. So here's Matthew chapter 21. He goes through the whole parable, what happens. He sends all the servants. They kill the servants eventually. Then he sends the son. Right? So obviously we're talking about Messiah. But when the farmers, who are the farmers? Judah. right? In this parable, they're the farmers. They're the ones that the land that has a fence around it, that has a wine press in it, that has a tower. The fence around it is Jerusalem. The tower is the center of Jerusalem. The wine press is the temple. That's the thing that was leased to them. The way to Elohim was leased to them. But when the farmers saw the son, they said amongst themselves, this is the heir. This is actually his land. This was actually promised to him. The promises were to Abraham and to his seed. Messiah is the seed. He is the very seed. All the promises go through him. We are heirs and co-heirs of the promise through Messiah. And they realize, at least in the parable, the master is making this very clear. They realize in their minds, this is the heir. In the parable, this is the one who actually owns the thing that we're on, that we have our wine press on, and we have our vineyard, and we have our fence. This is the one who actually owns it. He's the heir. And so they say, this is the heir. Come, let us kill him. Okay, they did that. But what happens after they kill him? And let us possess his inheritance. What's the inheritance? The city, the land, the wine press, the vineyard, all of it is his. So what do they want to possess? All of it. They want all of it for themselves, not through the Son. They want it for themselves their way. This is really, and Sister Yesenia said this to me the other day, and just a marvelous concept. This is the story of Jacob and Esau. Esau is the first one there. It's supposed to be his inheritance, but because of lack of interest, because of all the crazy things he did, it goes to Jacob, who desires it. The inheritance goes through him. And then what happens in the entire story? Esau wants the inheritance back and will do anything he can, including destroying his brother, to get it. This is the story that's going on here. They want the inheritance. They may have been given it first because in order of chronology, they're here first, but Messiah is really the first. He's a type of Jacob. And so they want to possess his inheritance. They want to take the land by their own means, their own strength, and possess the wine press, the temple, and the city. It says, and they took him, and they threw him out of the vineyard. They killed him outside Jerusalem, outside the temple, and they killed him. And then the master says, so what in the parable, questioning them, what should they do to these people that did this thing? And here's the answer to the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the priests, and all the people that followed them. They said to them, evil ones, meaning the people who did this, he shall bring them to evil destruction, their city, the temple, all of it, Jerusalem, and lease the vineyard to other farmers, to other people. The seed that comes from Messiah, like Jacob has the 12 sons that begins the nation. Messiah has the 12 disciples that begins the nation. Still called Israel. He is the true Israel, the one that wrestles with Elohim and man and overcomes. That's who Messiah is. And a nation of the fullness of Ephraim, the Gentiles, comes in with those who are the faithful of Judah, because he has two sheepfolds, and he must make the two sheepfolds one sheepfold. But these people get kicked out, the ones who do not believe, and the city and everything else gets destroyed. This is the leasing the vineyard to other farmers, is until the completeness of the nations has come in, is until the times of the nations are full, is even until the complete end that is poured out on the one who lays waste. It shall be put to an end. Messiah says, and that thing that's left there, not one stone upon another at all. That's the final sort of nail in the coffin, if you would. This is the parable. I want you to hold on to this in the back of your mind for a couple of minutes, because we're going to get back to it in a second. Okay, so with that said, let's take a look at this now. As I said, a revival went on in Israel from the time of Messiah's resurrection. I mean, think about it. He wasn't there. He's not in the grave. They know he's up. He's seen by over 500 people. The disciples are preaching and teaching. Miraculous things are still going on. And then Shavuot comes. myriads of Jews got saved. Myriads of Jews came to the understanding of Mashiach, were baptized in Messiah, began new lives, went out and spread out. This word went everywhere, which absolutely ticked off the leadership who wanted him dead because they didn't want to lose their place with Rome. So this revival, we think, 30, 40 years and the Gentiles come in. No, the revival lasted about 120 years of Jews of every sort coming to the faith in Messiah, and Gentiles, yes, as well, but Jews all over the place, predominantly Jews for the first 50, 60 years, and a large volume of Jews for the next 120 years. So don't think of this as all of a sudden this became a Greek thing. This was always a Hebrew mindset, not a Jewish thing, a Hebrew mindset. And these are just some. I can give you a whole list of others and some of the places you can go to check this out. Eusebius of Caesarea, the father of church history, he shows that for nearly 70 years after the resurrection, the mother church, as he calls it, remained ethnically and culturally Jewish, even after the destruction of the temple in 70 AD. You can read this if you like for yourself in the Ecclesiastical History, Book 4, Chapter 5. You can look this up yourself. I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right, but Hagesippus, from 110 to 180 in his memoirs, which preserved in fragments by Eusebius, he describes the peace of the early church under the leadership of the family of Jesus, that is the family of Yeshua. His family, James, John, and for a couple of generations after that, were the leaders in Jerusalem, all the way up to the destruction and even beyond. Of the early church under the leadership of the family of Jesus, he notes that the relatives of Jesus, the Despoini, were leaders in the Judean congregations and were even interrogated by Emperor Domitian, who eventually released them as harmless peasants. And you can find this in the Ecclesiastical History, Book 3. Here is another one, Justin Martyr, from 100 to 165 AD. That's the time of his life. Justin makes a crucial admission. He acknowledges that there are still, in his day, many Jewish Christians. Netzarim, we would call them, or people of the way. But in fact, we wouldn't even say Christian from a Hebrew perspective. You say Messianics, because the word Messianic and the word Christian mean the same thing. One is a Greek way of saying it. The other is a Hebrew way of saying it. Of course, it's come to mean two very, very different things today than when we clash with each other. But we're talking about the definitions of this day. Jewish Christians who believed in Jesus as the Messiah while continuing to observe the law of Moses up to 165 AD. You can read this in the Dialogue with Trypho, chapter 47. And I'm going to give you a dozen other references. This should be enough. You guys can look this up yourself. A great revival was going on. Yes, there were many, because it says, in part, Israel has fallen away. Not all the branches were broken off. Many were still there. At the same time, all of this is going on. Yes, Gentiles are coming in. And who's teaching the Gentiles? The Jews are. The Jews are teaching the Gentiles. And of course, it just grows and grows and grows. While all of this is going on, the main persecution comes from Judaism, comes out of the Sanhedrin, comes from the priests, it comes from the Pharisees. This goes on for 40 years. And of course, Rome gets involved in it too, and the persecution of the believers. But this goes on for the next 40 years, from the time of the breaking of the lintel all the way to the time of the destruction of the rest of the stones. All this persecution is going on against those who are the believers, Jewish in particular, until 70 AD. And here it is again. But when the farmers saw that the son, they said amongst themselves, this is the heir, come, let us kill him. And they have tried to possess his inheritance. Now, this is after 70 AD. So the temple is destroyed. Many people, 1 million people are dead, slaves, all the rest of it. They're still Jews, though. They're still Jews. I mean, this persecution was beyond just Jerusalem. It was all of Judea. It was all the way from Galilee. It was all over the world. In Egypt, felt it all over the world. The Romans were going after the Jews, but many Jews survived. Jerusalem survives. And what did the Jewish leaders, the rabbis now who are in charge, who begin the whole Talmud thing, rabbinical Judaism, what did they do after this? Here's what they said in their hearts. And let us possess his inheritance. Let's go back to the land, take it, rebuild the temple, rebuild Jerusalem, and let's start over. And there has, beloved, in history been 3 attempts to rebuild the temple and the temple worship. And today, the 4th attempt is being done right in our midst. We're watching it today. You're watching it online. You're seeing all the videos, the red heifer and the Passover slaughter and all the rest of this stuff and what's going on the Temple Mount. We're watching it today. But what we lack, because so many of us, so many of the Christian world today, the Gentile world, are rooting them on and saying, yeah, this is great. The Messiah is going to come back. When they do this, at least that's the idea. It's the whole dispensational idea. Then all of this stuff Messiah said is going to actually come true when it's come true already. What's actually coming true is, and let us possess the inheritance is coming true. That's what's coming true. And this is the 4th time that this has happened. So let's go through this. Here we go. Here I'm going to give you the 3. The first time that they tried to reestablish worship and reestablish dominance in Jerusalem, to come back, because they were scattered everywhere, they were scattered all over, but they started to come back, was during what was called the Keto Wars. No, this has nothing to do with the keto diet. This is a different one. This is a Greek king. Actually, I would pronounce his name Quietus, but it's actually Ketus, which is why it's called the Keto Wars. These lasted from 115 to 117 AD. Here it is, Keto Wars. There were many messiahs, many people who rose up and took that title, just like it was in 70 AD, the 3 different messiahs that divided up Jerusalem. Later on, people are still trying to follow these false messiahs and come back to Jerusalem. Many of the messiahs, fought to get back to Jerusalem and to restore temple service. This was the goal. These were regional uprisings. This happened in Syria. It happened in Egypt. It happened in Judea. It happened in different places. So there was a different messianic figure in different places. But some of the biggest messianic figures of the Keto Wars, or one of the biggest, was a man named Lucius, sometimes called Andreas in Greek sources. He led the uprising in what's today modern-day Libya. So we're talking, on the African continent, past Egypt. He led the uprising there. And of course, Rome was not happy about that. So these uprisings are popping up everywhere. It's the Jews. 70 AD is over. They got the monument. We conquered them. But it's not over because they just keep popping up and rebelling everywhere. Another one was Judea Pappus and Lulianos, who were 2 brothers who led an uprising in Jerusalem, because there were still Jews in Jerusalem at that day. And so they're fighting the Romans again, guerrilla style, fighting them, sneak attacks, killing them. So what does Rome do? Well, Trajan, he sends his general, Lucius Quietus, really Ketus, again, the word Ketos, Emperor Trajan is just, he's had enough of this from the time of Titus all the way till now. This thing has never ended. So what does he do? He sends, I think it's 6 different legions, or 8 legions of Roman soldiers back to Jerusalem. And you can see the picture there. That's the Temple Mount. That's how they wanted it to stay. And they crushed the people of Israel. They crushed the people that were left in Judah. You can see and read information about this in Eusebius of Caesarea's Ecclesiastical History, Book 4, and in the Talmud. It mentions the wars of Quietus, but don't bother. I wouldn't get too deep into the Talmud. That's a whole other message for a whole other day. But anyway, it's a historical thing. At least you see it's mentioned. So again, on the picture there, this is what look what Jerusalem winds up looking like, and that would be the Temple Mount, crushed again. Whatever they wanted to start gets crushed. Rome is just not going to put up with this again after all that has already gone on. But this is not the last time. Then, between 132 and 135, Rabbi Akiva, who even today is regarded as one of the greatest rabbis of Judaism. They still do a ceremony to him or a big holiday about Rabbi Akiva, even today. Rabbi Akiva from 50 to 135 AD was one of the most influential Jewish sages of his time. During the Bar Kokhba revolt, he publicly supported Simon Bar Kokhba. And here's the kicker. Here is Rabbi Akiva taking the role of the prophet, and he is publicly supporting Simon Bar Kokhba, and he has identified him as the long-awaited Mashiach. What a slap in the face to Messiah. Here, the Messiah has already come, and here now we've got, still today, one of the most prominent rabbis in all of Hebrew history, identifying a man as the Messiah to come, to defeat Rome, to reestablish worship, because this was all about worship in the temple, to reestablish Jerusalem. Rabbi Akiva interpreted the book of Numbers, chapter 24, verse 17, that says, "And a star shall come out of Jacob." We know that one. We know the birth story, right? He interpreted it as referring to him, referring to Bar Kokhba. Because of this, it is Rabbi Akiva who gave him the name Bar Kokhba, which means son of the star. So he took a prophecy that is a messianic prophecy, and this false prophet identified a false Messiah. And he's held up as one of the greatest rabbis in Judaism. That should tell us something, guys. That nothing's changed. It's still the same thing as it was when Messiah was here. The vipers and snakes and all the rest of that. It's still here. It's still the blind leading the blind. They're not doubling down. They're tripling and quadrupling down on the error. Even though they have seen the lintel broken, 40 years later, they have seen the temple broken. They saw somebody try it again. They saw the land destroyed. But now another Messiah is here. We're going to do it all over. Simon Bar Kokhba led a highly successful guerrilla war that actually managed to establish an independent Jewish state for 3 years. Even minted coins during the period depicting the temple facade and the words "for the freedom of Jerusalem." So they had their own little coins, like there is today. Ever see the coins today? It's got Trump's face on it and Cyrus's face on it, and on the other side of it, it has the temple on it. They did that back then. They created little coins, their own coins, for the freedom of Jerusalem. And of course, they actually wound up restarting an altar. They didn't get to building a temple, and they weren't able to yet, but they began to do sacrifices, the morning oblation and the evening oblation, on that same site that was torn down. On that same site, they began to do these sacrifices. It's not the temple. So what happens? Hadrian sends 6 full legions to crush the revolt. I mean, just an overwhelming military presence comes in and just romps Jerusalem, just destroys the revolt, destroys the people in it. And this Emperor Hadrian, is so pissed off with this, that this thing is just not ending. They just keep doing this. We've already won. Our God is greater than your God. Our God's been sacrificed. We did sacrifice to him here. There's a monument in Rome still today you can see that shows we won. We defeated. We took all the utensils. It's ours. It's in Rome. So following the Roman victory, Hadrian didn't just stop the rebuilding, because that's what they were trying to do. So he didn't just knock down the altar. He was like, enough. He attempted to erase the Jewish connection to the land by renaming the country, the province. Instead of calling it Israel or Judah, they called it Syria Palestina. Uh-oh, that should be really familiar to us today, because what's the whole argument about? It's the land of Palestina, Palestine. Well, the reason it's the name Palestina is because Hadrian was so pissed off, he wanted to erase the Jewish presence. Palestinia, Syria Palestinia, and Jerusalem was renamed Aelia Capitolina. No more Jerusalem, Aelia Capitolina. So there were still Jews living in the land, still Jews living in what was that country, that city, but they weren't living in Jerusalem anymore. They were living in Aelia Capitolina, and they weren't Israelites anymore. They were Palestinians. And to pour oil on the whole thing, he began building a pagan temple to Jupiter on the Temple Mount. So Titus comes in and brings in the standards, the eagle, which is a symbol of the god of Jupiter, the god of the main god, the chief god, like the god Zeus. of Rome. They offer sacrifices in the temple after it's burnt down. Worship is done just like the abomination of desolation done in the days of the Greeks when they offered a pig to Zeus in the temple area. Rome does the same thing. And now these years later, not only did they worship and give sacrifices on that land, they built a temple to Jupiter on top of it, on top of the place where the presence of Elohim left already. It's already gone. He's already left the holy place. How do we know? Because the lintel was broken, because the veil was ripped, because the first of all the stones was broken. But every stone is going to be tossed, not one standing upon another. All right, so this is the second attempt, and it gets crushed. Here is, so Hadrian builds this temple to Jupiter. You can see on the top of the temple, there was the god Jupiter, and he's riding in a chariot. He's got the sun behind him, the halo behind him. The same statue that Titus put up on the arch to commemorate the destruction of the God of Israel, of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, of the Jews. Well, the statue's not there, but the pillar is there. The arch is still there. Same thing. And it winds up that what was the Temple Mount becomes the center place for the next 200 to 250 years. Aelia Capitolina becomes the center of Jupiter worship, the chief god of the Romans. The god of Rome was worshipped there. The same god that offered in 70 AD by Titus is now being worshipped there. Until around the 300s and 400s, as the Roman emperor brought on Christianity into the nation, eventually they began, and at some point they began to tear this temple down as the country became, the empire became more and more Christian. So I want you to think about this. Think about this for a second. Yah's presence left first. And when Yah's presence left or was removed, vacated, another came in and proclaimed itself Elohim on the very site. On the very site. So the first time they try to rebuild, crushed. The second time they try to rebuild, crushed, and another temple is put on top of it. This is not, trying to restore this has not been a good thing. Why? Because the prophecy is, or the words of Messiah and Daniel are, to the end. It's the end, till the fullness of the Gentiles. That's it. Okay. So history goes on. Eventually, the nephew of Constantine. Now, we're not getting into the validity of Constantine and was he really a believer and all the rest of that. Bottom line is he definitely mixed what was Christianity with what was Rome then, stopped the conflict. It was a great political move on his part. And certainly he did allow many of the people who were believers to thrive, but not all. They went after the Jews. They went after the Netzarim. So it wasn't all cotton candy and roses, but this is how the history unfolded. Many more Gentiles were coming in, and we can discuss the merits of that and how history plays out. Either way you cut it, Rome does become much, much more Christian, much, much more Messiah-oriented. But you'll see if you look through, if you start to read the stuff, just like we showed the difference between the Greek mindset and the Hebrew mindset, the Roman mindset is just as different. And so the story does begin to get twists and turns and colors that are Gentile Roman, not Gentile Roman thinking, not Hebraic thinking, Latin thinking, and Latin or Greek thinking, but not Hebrew thinking. But that aside, it's history. It happened. Nothing we can do about it. Here we are today. His nephew. So he's got three sons. I wrote down their names somewhere. It was Constantine II. It was Constance, and then it was Constantinius II. Like they couldn't come up with another name. They ruled after him. And then finally, his nephew ruled. His nephew's name was Julian, and he was called Julian the Apostate because he hated Christianity. He hated what Rome became. He loved the sacrifices. He was a violent man, a bloody man. And he wanted paganism to thrive again in the nation. And he hated the idea that the Jews couldn't do sacrifice. Here it is Emperor Julian, who rejected Christianity in favor of a Hellenic, that is a Greek paganism, which is what Rome was, sought to undermine the Christian triumph. Here's what he tried to do. By proving the prophecy of the temple's permanent destruction. Even back here, they realized the words of Messiah and Daniel were speaking of a permanent destruction. Hebraic mindset, the lintel is broken. The place is done. Cannot be restored. It is unclean. Messiah, Greek way, the way has now been opened for us to come to Elohim. That's also the Hebrew thinking too, but that's just the Greek thinking. They're not thinking about the temple. Hebrew mindset's thinking, this is big. This is Daniel. So he wanted to prove that prophecy wrong. Julian issued an imperial edict allowing the Jews to return and rebuild. He even provided state funding and the materials to do it. So he got artisans from all over the world, pagan artisans, people that have nothing to do with the Jews or with the God of Elohim, all to come in. He brought the Jews in, and he asked the Jews, you can see that in a little picture there, he asked the Jews, why don't you do sacrifice like all of the other pagans around us? And their response was, now he's using them because he wants to restore paganism, which is sacrificial animals. And the Jews are using him because they want the temple. So they tell him, well, we can't do sacrifice except in Jerusalem and on the temple. He's like, well, if we build the temple in Jerusalem, will you then do sacrifice? They're like, of course we will. So it's kind of like he's using them and they're using him to get what they want. They want a temple and he wants people to sacrifice. I guess maybe he's trying to get them to become pagan at some point. They're just thinking, hey, we're going to get Jerusalem rebuilt. We're going to get the temple and Rome's going to pay for the whole thing. That's good. You can read more about this in the by Armenian Marcellus. He's a pagan author. Not from a Christian background. He's a contemporary pagan historian. In his book, Res Gestae, book 23, and the letters of Julian himself, all this information comes out, tells how he does it, why he does it, all the rest of that. Can't go into all of that. We only have an hour. So that's that. So here's what winds up happening. They get to, they go back, the temple that Hadrian put up, it's crumbling. The Christians over time have been tearing it down piece by piece. It's just a mess there in Jerusalem on the Temple Mount. So he gets all of these artisans from all over the world, and Jews start coming from everywhere to help with the construction. This is a great thing. We're going to rebuild Jerusalem. We're going to rebuild the temple. The temple's coming up. The next temple's going to be built. So everybody goes there to work. Now you can read about this history. There are just so many references. I can only give you a couple for what I'm about to tell you. You can again read this by Armenius Marcellinus in his book, in his writings, Res Gestae. I have no idea what that means. Book 23. Chapters, book 1, chapters 2 and 3. Historian, this is a church historian named Gregory of Nazianzus. In his Oration 5, he talks about what happens with an illumination of a cross that they saw in the sky. I think it's more of a tav, but they see a cross in the sky. A historian called Socrates Scholasticus, not the Socrates we think of, a different Socrates, common name, in his writings of Ecclesiastical History, Book 3, Chapter 20, he writes about the huge earthquake that actually wound up dislodging the last stones that still remained from the temple that was there in 70 AD that were still in the ground. The earthquake lodged up the last stone so that not one stone remained that was not torn down. A writer, early church historian, Sozman, in his Ecclesiastical History, Book 5, Chapter 22, tells us it was men, women, children, artisans, people from everywhere. And I'm just giving you the summary of it. You guys can look this up if you want. There's probably another 20 or 30 witnesses to what I'm about to tell you. Because here's what they say happened. All these people came there. There was first of all, there was a torrential storm, lightning, thunder, rain. People died as mudslides came in and took out buildings. People died. trying to take all the debris, because it became really a dumping ground. So they had to take all that debris for the last 100 or so years and remove it all. Remember, they don't have any excavators back there. They got no backhoes. This is all done by hand and by back, and shovel and pick and axe. That's how you do all of this, and cart with a horse or a donkey. So they're doing this all by hand. Many of them died in these torrential rainstorms. Then in May in 363, an earthquake, the earthquake that who is it? Socrates speaks about. An earthquake happened that was so violent, the buildings fell down with workers in it, killed more workers in it, and it brought the stones up from the ground, dislodged them out of the ground from the original temple, or the second temple that was there. But here's the kicker. And the whole thing with the sign of the cross in the sky, and they even say on people's clothing where signs of the mark of the Tav or the mark of the cross seem to appear. But here's the kicker. As they were excavating and digging into the ground to get to the actual base, here's what happened. I know it sounds crazy, but this is attested to by eyewitnesses and dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of writings. Here's what happens. As they start to dig, an explosion. Fireballs start coming out of the ground. Not just once, they said over and over and over again. Killing people, burning people, maiming people, debris, killing people, maiming people. And this didn't go on for a minute. This went on for a while. Now, the natural, maybe anti-spiritual way of looking at this, you'd say, well, maybe they hit some sort of a methane pocket as they were digging down all the dead bodies and the horses. Some say maybe it was Solomon's stables that were under there and all the decay matter. And I don't know, maybe. Bottom line, guys, is fireballs came shooting out of what was the temple way before that Messiah said, until the end, that's it, not one stone. When Daniel said, the end, that's it, until the end of the Gentiles. Paul says, until the end of that's it. And they tried the first time and got destroyed. They tried the second time and got destroyed. And now the third time, if this doesn't remind you of Mount Sinai, this doesn't remind you of Sodom and Gomorrah. And it actually did, because they say many of the people became believers in Messiah there, Jews who weren't believers before. Many of the pagans became believers in Messiah. And the Emperor Julian, the apostate, he was like, we're not going to do this anymore. This is a horrible omen. Everything we do, look at all this destruction and death. We shouldn't be doing this. And then he winds up dying, I think, the next year on a military campaign. This was the last time that they tried to rebuild the temple. Wow. This was the last time they tried to rebuild the temple. And obviously, you can see from just the picture there, horrific, horrific. Well, it winds up that temple area for a long time winds up looking like this. Plain, nothing on it. At some point, Rome is taken over by Islam. Islam didn't want to take over and destroy Rome. Islam wanted to become Rome. The symbol of the cross and the moon is a Roman symbol. They took over Constantinople. Turkey took over Constantinople. They became Rome. And what did they do? They came back to the same area under Islam, and they built this on that mount. So what used to be the temple to Jupiter by Rome is now those who have taken over Rome, this right here. And crazy enough, that is actually was the Caliph who did this in 619. Hired the Byzantine Christians architects. He hires Christian architects. Why they would do it, Christian? Well, I guess they didn't want the temple there either. So they built this. But you'll notice here on this third picture, this is a Byzantine church. This is the Dome of the Rock, familiar thing that we were. Notice how they look alike, because it was Byzantine architects, Christian architects. They built to them a church. There was no such thing as Islamic architecture. They just took over whatever Christian country they conquered. They took over their churches and they became mosques. Same thing that's going on today all around us. Same exact thing. Well, they took over the Temple Mount and they put this there. And as I said, it's in the same format as the Byzantine church. Just crazy, crazy, right? Now, this is not, contrary to this is not a mosque. The Dome of the Rock is actually like a memorial over what they believe is the foundation stone. So it's not, the mosque is actually the Alaska Mosque, which would be centered probably right around here, where the picture of the Byzantine church is. That's the actual mosque, even though they do use it, for prayers and stuff now. And of course, nobody's allowed up there, or Jews aren't allowed up there, or people that are up there, you can't go up there, you can't pray. Or anybody that's been there, all the craziness that you got to go through to get there. So this area is still occupied by a foreign deity. And still today, what is the desire of today? Today, let us come and take his inheritance. It hasn't changed. It hasn't changed. That's crazy. It hasn't changed. And today, a lot of Christendom, and thank you for the misspelling there on lentil. Thank you, bro. I appreciate that typo. It hasn't changed. Still trying to take back the vineyard and the winepress and the tower from the one who is the Son, to whom it all belongs. That's wrong. That is anti the Son. And so we've got today a whole huge part of Christendom and others that we're all rooting for this. We're rooting for this. We're rooting for the red heifer. We're rooting. Hold on a second. What has happened so far throughout history every time this has been attempted? Nothing good. Nothing good. What happens when the Roman emperor tries to defeat the words of the prophecy? Nothing good. Miraculous, crazy explosions, fireballs, mudslides, earthquakes. I mean, how much more do you need? And here we are today. And we're in that same position today. And we're rooting on. We say, well, it's great that the Jews are in the land. It's their land. Why wouldn't they be in the land? I'm fine with the Jews being in the land, but beloved, this is not the way to the presence of Elohim. The lentil, Lintel, the lentil has been broken. It's the backbone of the way into the holy of holies has been broken, and the veil has been rent in two. That is the first stone of all the rest of the stones that will be laid waste. Not one upon another would be standing. And it is that way even until today. So let's just say that they do it, and they do put this together. Nothing good is going to come out of this, even if it does get put up. Beloved, nothing good is going to come out of this. Some really, really tough things are going to come. And I know that people are looking for it. And I know people would hear this and say, oh, wow, that's just an anti-Semitic. No, it's not anti-Semitic. It's not anti-Jewish. I'm telling you what Messiah said. He said this stuff was happening. You're going to call him anti-Semitic? He said Daniel said this was going to happen. You're going to call him anti-Semitic? The early church believers knew this was going to happen. In the Hebrew gospel, they realize it's the lentil that gets broken. It's the temple is void for the next 40 years. Even if you do check out the Talmud, in the next 40 years, it says that the fire, the light on the candle would not burn, or it kept going out in the holy place. That the doors kept opening up that needed 20 people to close them. That the actual sacrifices, the Yom Kippur was falling on the wrong goat. Just one sign after the other sign after the other sign, that the building that they were in had now become an abomination, and the first stone had already fallen. And they had 40 years, the time of a generation. That's why he says this generation. He's going to give them one generation to turn around, to hear the gospel. He empowered them with languages and gifts and miracles to prove it to them. And many, many, many came, but many, many, many refused. and are still refusing today. Beloved, if you have a prayer for the people of the Middle East, for the people of Israel, the prayer shouldn't be for red heifers or for Aaronic priests or for Sanhedrins. The prayer shouldn't be for a temple. The prayer should be for open eyes to understand who the high priest really is, to understand that the inheritance belongs to the Son. And you cannot pull an Esau to try to get the inheritance back from Jacob. Yes, you can call him a usurper, which is certainly what a lot of our Jewish brethren call the Mashiach, a usurper, a pretender, someone who shouldn't be there. That's fine. That's what Jacob was called. But his name was changed, and he became the one who wrestled both with man and God and overcame both on the cross for all of us. And at his death, the lintel is broken, and not one stone remains upon another, even until today. Yes, rebellion. It's like Korah's rebellion. The issue must be resolved by the proof of, priesthood. I like that. AKA Aaron's rod that budded. Wow. May we see the confirmation. I like that. I like that. Very good. Yeah, right. Good thinking. Great spiritually putting it together. That's why we got to have the whole story. We got to read the whole story. We got to read the entire story and start to put these pieces together. Esau and Jacob come into this. Korah comes into this. Solomon and the temple, those who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray. I will hear from this place and answer their prayer. But if not, I'm going to kick you out. I'm going to destroy this place. You're going to become a pirate, and I'm going to scatter you all over the earth. Moses' words are confirmed. So we got to understand the whole story to put this together. So, beloved, we are living in very interesting times. Look at what's going on all over the world, all around us right now. And I wonder if we're just starting to see the earthquake, starting to see the landslide. Maybe the fireballs are coming next. Who knows? Either way, Mashiach, Messiah, he is King. Guys, thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I hope that you guys enjoyed that. Listen to it again, download the notes. Don't forget, we've got movie night coming up on the 28th. It's everybody bring something, sort of a covered dish. We'll get in touch with everybody, make sure we know what's coming. We're going to be watching The Passion of the Christ, powerful movie. We're going to check that out. And then, of course, we've got a mikvah on the 4th. That's just before Passover. We invite you to that. It's going to be a lot of fun. You need help setting all of that up and cleaning that up. We'll have a little bit of food after that too. And then we're going to prepare on that day and get everything ready for Passover on that Tuesday, the 7th. I'll let you guys know when the Abib starts so that you can do the same counting to get us to the 7th, to know that's the first Wednesday after the spring solstice. I'll do that on Morning Manners. Listen to Morning Manners. I'll put that out. Maybe we can talk about it this weekend as well. So we got a lot going on. After that, the Feast of Unleavened Bread, the last day on that, we're going to have a worship night. So got a lot of stuff coming. And then, of course, we count the Omer until Shavuot and remember what happened on that day too. So got a lot of stuff coming up. The spring feasts are upon us. Why do we celebrate them? Because they are about Messiah and they help us understand the story. Guys, with that, thank you so much for hanging out with me tonight. Have an awesome rest of the evening. We'll see you tomorrow on Morning Manna and Friday night for our Hidden Manna. Guys, be blessed and shalom.